All righty. Welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, serving online information entrepreneurs throughout the US and the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am so excited to bring my friend on today, Erin, Loman, Jeck. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's always fun hanging out with you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I love it. We're way overdue. I joked like it's only taken me 3 years to get you on the podcast. I know you're a busy lady. You've also moved, like you've done multiple moves even in the last, handful of years, few years. So I know you've had lots going on, but we originally met because you were Seattle based and we I think first overlapped at some in-person events like many years ago.
Right. And I'm actually thinking, so I haven't said this publicly yet, so this will be the first time. I think I'm going to host an event in Seattle in like May.
Ooh, how
So I'd love to have
fun.
you come and speak too. So that'd be awesome.
Oh my gosh, I love it, right? Well, you ran, was it the Speaker Summit, Speaker
Yep.
Success Summit, like in 2017-ish? It felt like
19, well, I had 17 in person
yes.
there. And the 18 and the 19, I took it to Palm Springs.
Yeah. So I think I participated in your 2017 version, which was super
Yep.
fun. And, then COVID and blah, blah, blah. So we'll just skip that part.
Yeah, we fast forward through that.
Totally. Fast forward. Anyways, point is, I've known Erin for a while. She's amazing. I'm super happy to have her here. For those of you that don't know Erin, Erin is the CEO of Transformational Speakers Agency, is an executive and TEDx speaking coach, and the host of the Transformational Speakers podcast. Erin is the leading authority on making an impact, influencing change, and inspiring action in others. Her approach to speaking is unique and powerful. She utilizes the psychology of connection to illustrate how you can unlock any audience's trust and rapport, which leaves them feeling better about themselves, and then they're challenged to adopt your new idea or perspective. Leaders seek her out to learn how to be more powerful in their influence, especially in the C-suite of organizations. She works with leaders to expand their sphere of influence through a strong personal brand, and I know we're speaking to a lot of personal brand builders on this podcast. A strong personal brand, presence, and powerful communication. She helps leaders develop their style and the courage to lead authentically. Erin is an executive communications consultant specializing in leadership development and interpersonal communication. Her lens on leadership empowers clients to positively impact their executive performance, effectively lead teams, and engage in transparent communication. She has extensive experience coaching high-level decision makers as they manage and communicate change. I love it. There's so much in there. I mean, because you're talking right on this podcast to entrepreneurs, small business owners, business leaders, and we all need to have and better develop these skills, right? The ability to communicate in a way that positively impacts our leaderships, our teams, whatever size they are, right? Communicate. I love that. And to effectively communicate change. So I love this topic. I've always been a fan of, well, first of all, leadership, but also communication. Generally, one of the earliest things I began studying in law school was alternative dispute resolution, right? Which is all about how we communicate. Yep. And so it's been a topic of really active study and part of my practice for, over 20 years now. Yeah. So Erin, I'd love for you to share a bit of the backstory around your pathway into speaking, right? And I think it's so fun to not only like get a glimpse into people's personal stories on this, but speaking in particular, so many people have a fear of speaking, right? It's like one of the biggest blocks that people can have, even when they're in leadership, even when they're already doing things that call on that as a strength, right? So I'm particularly curious, about people who are like really drawn to that as a primary thing.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't a straight path. I didn't wake up when I was 4 and say, I can't wait to be a speaking coach. My dream job was a dolphin trainer. And I did get to do that in the Florida Keys, which was so much fun.
A dolphin trainer. Okay. So I've never heard this. I love that.
Yeah. When I was there, they said, I was going to get my marine biology degree. And they were like, no, you actually either need a speaking or a teaching degree or a like teaching, or what was the other one? Psychology. And I was like, well, I love people. So I was like, let's do psychology. So I went to school to be a therapist. And because I was like, I got to go back and be a dolphin trainer one day. Except, let me just be real. It makes $8.50 an hour in the Florida Keys. I don't know how anyone can survive on that. So I was bartending at night and dolphin training in the day, right? So that shortly was, came to my idea, like, I can't keep doing this if I'm going to have a family, if I'm going to do all these things. So I went to school to be a therapist, and about 10 credits shy of my master's, I dropped out. I was in my clinicals, and everyone just kept complaining. It just kept complaining. And we would like, here's some ideas. Here's some things you could try. And then I come back. Have you tried it? No. And I'm like, what are we doing here? I can't do this for the rest of my life. See the same 20 people. And the thing was, all of the professors were saying, this is job security. They just keep coming back and back and back. I was like, there are more people in the world I want to change, right? Not just these same people. So I was like, yeah, I'm not really cut out for this. And being an empath, it was really hard sitting in people's darkest stuff. They would dump it all out. And then I was like, 10 patients later, I was just like, oh, I can't do this. Right. So that's when I decided. I remember it was so funny. I remember going, well, Tony Robbins doesn't have a master's degree. He doesn't have a college degree, but it was the thing that made me go, okay, then I want to be a coach. And being a coach, I didn't even know what I was getting into. I was like, I've been a softball and volleyball coach all the way up to college level. So I was like, okay, coach fits. But it was like, all right, I don't know what I should be doing. And so it was, first of all, like a business. And I was like, I was really doing really well in business. I was telling, I was sitting on nonprofit boards and helping them negotiate. Well, that they were saying, we want to heal the world. And the donors were like, where's the ROI? Right. And so I was really good at getting them to translate that they were both wanting the same things. And so I started to realize that business coaching was the path. And it was about 3 years into business coaching, I was driving to the world's greatest speaking training with Brendan Burchard, Bo Easton, and Roger Love. And I heard the big booming voice say, get in your lane. And I'm literally driving in Oregon from Seattle to San Francisco. I was driving and I was like, I am in my lane. And like, no, the lane I made for you. And you should be working with speakers. And I was like, why speakers? And then that whole drive, I was like, okay. So I said, all right. I had just finished an event. I had 3 people that were putting deposits together to work with me. And I called them and I said, if you're not a speaker, I'm no longer business coaching. Oh, and it was painful and scary to say. Like, you take a big risk. But I planted that flag and I said, okay. And then the first person I walked into in the restroom at the hotel before the event even started, this woman's name was Grace and my daughter's middle name is Grace. And so I started a conversation and she says, what do you do? And I said, I'm a speaking coach. I barely choked that out. And she goes, I need to hire you. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. That was fast.
Right. Here's your affirmation.
You asked and there it is. Right. So that's literally how I fell into, I would say, or stumbled into. And everyone kept saying, I see you speak everywhere. You're so awesome. You do this so well. I see you everywhere on all these stages. How do you do this? And I was like, And that's literally why I went to the world's greatest speaking training, to see what it was and to kind of understand, why was I good at this and what was I doing? And there was a lot of things I was doing unconsciously, but it really turned for me at that moment. I really realized, all right, then I'm going to really focus on this. And the rest has been history.
Oh my gosh. I love stories that involve following those nudges. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're like that, like bam in your face, but then you had the guts to do it. And immediately, right, the universe was like, here you go, rewarding you.
For it.
Yeah,
Yep.
totally. Yeah. Oh, that's super fun. What is it, do you think, either, because now you've been doing this for some time, right?
Years.
Yeah. What is it about speaking that really fits for you?
Yeah. So the beautiful thing, I love being able to change the world. Like I said, it's why I wanted to be a therapist, right? What I realized, that just not my message and not just my voice could do that. And so if I can help amazing people with different topics, with different things, different audiences that I'll ever touch, that I can help them make an impact that they want to make. And that ripple effect will be huge. So, you think about it, helping one speaker, and if they speak to 10,000 people in their lifetime, I just changed that many people's lives. The impact, the multiplication of impact that has. And then what I love is all of us that are servants' hearts, when we make really good money, nonprofits and charities and causes are all funded. So that also is a ripple effect that I get to be a piece of by just doing what I do best with helping people do this.
Totally. Oh yes, it's the rising tide lifts all boats. And I think so many, I mean, this is so much of what I love about the small business and entrepreneurship community.
Mhm.
Different even than the startup world, right? Because like, yes, I've supported some folks on the startup path, and then I often send them other places. It's like the people that I'm here to serve as well from a legal perspective are those that need to build a thriving small business. But let's be clear, like their goal is to do really meaningful work through that business
Yeah.
for as long as they want to do it, right? And those
I love
are
that.
those mission driven, very conscious entrepreneurs that are clear on their path.
Well, and I love that you help people be protected. I remember having something come up, and of course, you always said it's when the S hits the fan, right? It's like, oh no, now I need somebody, right? And if we just were proactive ahead of time, just saying these are the things that are going to save you from those headaches. And I
Mhm.
love that because it's so important when it does slap you in the face, when you start to build too big or too fast, or things slip through the cracks, or you forgot to send a contract, or you don't have a contract, whatever it is. It's like, I see people and I'm like, what are you doing? Hello. You're just walking into the fire. And I love that you kind of lock arms with us and walk the fire across. But even before we get there, you're like, okay, now here's what's going to happen. And this could potentially happen. And so here's how we're going to protect you. And I just think that that's so awesome.
Oh,
You're just an angel.
you're so cute to say that. Well, I really care a lot because here's the thing about the folks that you support, that I support, is that they are changing the world with their information,
Yeah.
right? And it is so often they actually have the very similar needs to a big business, just at a completely different scale. And the traditional legal world just is not very well set up to support those folks. So it's, anyways, we could go very deep into that. But the point is, the folks that you serve are doing really meaningful things with their information, right? And some of them are inside of larger organizations. You're talking to the C-suite folks as well. But from the standpoint of the entrepreneurs, the small business owners, the folks that are creating transformational change through their speaking, even through their writing, through their digital courses and offerings. I mean, I feel like when you are an entrepreneur or small business owner, you can't not figure out how to speak,
Right.
right? And especially if you're a personal brand builder, because everything you do is marketing, is that exchange of information, and speaking can transform all of it. And learning how to speak well, I feel like correlates into so much more than
Yeah.
just speaking.
Well, and I think, the people don't realize this, but it's the fastest path to cash. If you are an entrepreneur and you want a cash injection, get on a stage and sell something, right?
Mhm.
And so you have to, what I remember is I remember going to a talk. My son was like 2 or 3 years old at the time. And he had to be 2 or younger because he needed diapers. So I remember needing to buy him diapers, right? And I'll never forget. I was like, oh, it's okay, honey. I'll go pick some up on the way home. I'm going to a speaking gig. I'm going to go sell my course. I went in and everyone's like, oh my gosh, you were so amazing, so awesome. Can you speak at my group? Can you speak at my group? But no one bought.
Mhm.
And I was like, I packed up all my stuff and I remember sitting in my car and I literally put my head on the steering wheel and I was like, I just let my family down. What is it I'm not doing? What's not working? And so my thing is, you got to be able to master that stage to make it so easy and effortlessly that people are like, wow, you're so awesome. I want to take you home with me. Not let me get you to the next stage or the next stage. I needed cash then, right? And it was
Mhm.
in that moment that I was like, I never want a speaker, someone who's sharing their knowledge and their wisdom to walk out without a sale. And so it really became,
Mhm.
I need to master this because I also want no one ever to feel this way that I do today. And that's what literally changed my life in that moment. And so that's when I became a speaker or a speaking coach, when I really started to do all those things and really learned what was wrong and what I wasn't doing. And there's an art to it. And it's not even like sales, right? Like we were talking about it earlier, like these people can come on and just be so pitchy and you're just like, nobody wants to hear your pitch. They want to know you. They want to know you. They want to fall in love with you. They want to connect with you. But if all you're doing is talking about me, and my offer, it doesn't land, right? So when you get up there to be able to share that, you do need to do it very masterfully so that it doesn't feel that way. And I mean, I've gotten on stages and literally forgot my offer because if somebody asked a question, I kind of got off there, and I was like, so if then I wrapped back up and I was finishing, and then somebody in the audience goes, well, how do we work with you? And I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot to even say it, right? But that's the beautiful thing when you're so good at it that even if you didn't make an offer, or you couldn't, even if it's even an offer, a place where you cannot sell from stage, they still want to line up and get whatever and take you home with them somehow, some way. Right. And so that's what I think is really beautiful. And it's so fast on the stage to do that. You can build rapport very quickly. You can engage them. And it's the funniest part is it's a one-way conversation, but it doesn't feel like it.
Oh, it's so true. It's, you know, I have learned public speaking. The funny thing is when I think back, and I'm not saying I'm great at it, I'm not an expert. I enjoy it mostly because I feel so passionately about what I speak about, right? So from that standpoint, I enjoy it, but I also have had to really learn how to like contain my energy because it's a little bit like having a team of racing horses you feel like you have to hold on to, right? Is how it feels inside. So, but where it started for me is like years ago as a little kid in church of all places. Right. So anyways, I won't go into the whole church story, but as children within a very specific church, you learned to speak because so often they would have kids cycle through different things where they would be speaking. And then I was also a musician. So for years and years as a pianist, I played competitively. It's different than speaking, but it's still like that stage experience.
Yep.
I never got over like the sweaty palms. As much as I got used to being up there, I never had a competition or a performance where my palms didn't sweat right beforehand, like get kind of this clammy feeling. And it was just kind of part of how it went. And I got to where like I got used to that. But it's really interesting looking back and realizing like how those early experiences served me in getting acclimated to like being in front of groups of people. But it's, you know, it's still always like I don't know how to describe it, a rush or like, you know, there's like the surge of adrenaline that for me, even now, I can't control. I can't make it not happen. Right.
And even me, I mean, and I speak so much and it's funny because I am not a scripted speaker. I really am not. I never have been. I give space for the universe to speak through me and I like say this story. I'm like, why am I saying this story? And then I'll get off stage and somebody's like, oh, I needed that,
really
that story. I was like,
that.
oh, you're the reason I told that story, right? So the funny thing is, I always still go, I'm not prepared enough because I don't know if I can get up there and know what to say. And so it's really for me, I go, oh, I'm not really prepared. I don't know what I'm going to say up there. And so I get all nervous too. Right. And I'm like, but it always comes out amazing because I've studied the craft and I know my stuff. Right.
Yes.
And so it's the thing. And I loved it because when you were talking about competitions, for me, and I got that big download was I've been on stages my whole life. I've been dancing since I was like 2 years old. My aunt was a dance teacher and I was on all these competitions and traveling and performance and smiling and right. And I think for me as well, it helped me to not be so nervous about it. When I worked, it was funny now living back in my old hometown, I used to work for the Chamber of Commerce and people would drive in and they'd be like, okay, tell us about Sandpoint. Where do we need to go? I'd take out a map and I was like 14. I'm like circling stuff. You go here, don't drive on this road, go this way, you know, all these things. And I'm just talking to all these strangers for the whole day. And I was thinking that the other day when we drove by it, I was like, that's so crazy that at 14, I was able to just stand at the desk and people come and I just would talk and I wasn't scared about it. I wasn't nervous. I just It became so second nature. But I think it's because I've been on stages my whole life, and it just, and I didn't talk when I was up there dancing,
Mhm.
but at the same time, you just learn how to perform.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's, it's really interesting because I think about, the years that I've spent now in business and entrepreneurship in law. I mean, even early in my law career, I did many presentations for various groups, like, and they were CLEs, continuing legal education seminars on legal ethics, on a variety of things, alternative dispute resolution that applied to like the construction or real estate field. So I've done a fair share of speaking, and it is always so fascinating. Like, you go to a business event or the kind of event where it's like speaker after speaker after speaker after speaker, you really get to see the different ways that people
Mhm.
present and either bring their personalities or structure their presentations. And so the funny thing, and I wanted to ask you about this because there are some folks in the entrepreneurial and business space that from the outside are very good speakers, meaning you watch them do their presentation. And for me, it took like seeing some of these folks multiple times where I was like, oh, here we go again. This is entirely scripted. Like, there's one guy in particular, I'm not going to say his name because I don't care for him too much, but he has this whole thing down, and it's very much, I'm sure, based on like all of the neuro-linguistic programming techniques and the big stack at the end, the value stack, and blah blah blah. And half of the room runs up to get this offer, by the way, which probably only 10% of people actually need. And what
Right.
I learned later is that his business model has a huge percentage of churn. A ton of people end up like opting out or not actually utilizing
Yep.
the thing, right? And so you see folks like that where you're like, well, they've mastered like certain parts of it, but it's from the standpoint of like, is it really working? Anyways,
Yeah.
so many thoughts around what it takes. Cause I've heard you say, you can get up and speak authentically, your stuff. I've done enough presenting where I know all the core elements, but I can go through them in 10 minutes if I need to, or I
Right.
can extend it to an hour and a half, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's the joy of speaking enough that you know which high points to hit, which stories to tell and when, but you can allow it to have flow, right?
Yeah. There are, there's a lot of people out there that use NLP. And so it's so funny. I shied away from NLP for a very long time. And then I went to this online workshop. It was a 3 day. And during it, I sold $100,000 package. I'd never even
Mm.
sold that. And I was like, we made a goal during this 3 day event. There's going to be a sales competition. So, and I'm all about competition. So I'm like, game on. So I was like, I set the goal. I'm like $100,000. And I was like, I had no idea how I would do that. Right. 3 days on a live Zoom or, in Zoom, those people that was in a live room, they actually had more people. Like, I could have sold probably that in one of those rooms. But here I'm sitting in my office watching this. Right. How am I going to do this? When do I make these calls? Who do I call? What do I sell? Do I sell an $18,000 package, and how many people I'd have to call? Then I was like, what if I call someone I know has the cash flow, who needs my services and hasn't pulled the trigger yet? Why don't I just call her? So I did. And during the lunch break, I sold my $100,000 package. Now, it was in that I realized there was so much more to NLP than just manipulation. Like, I did not
Mhm.
want to do that, right? That is not who I am. But some of the tools, I wish all coaches would go through it for some of the tools, the breakthrough beliefs. I got rid of it, an addiction to, I guess it wasn't really an addiction, but Red Bull, right? I used to drink Red Bull all the time.
Mhm.
Was able to get rid of that during this training. So some of the things I was able to do was awesome. And I went all the way through to be the trainer. So I'm an LP trainer now. What I loved is the things that I grabbed from it that you can use that are really helpful. So if you think about it, there's visual, kinesthetic, auditory digital, and auditory learners, right?
Mhm.
Auditory digital is a lot of the self-talk. So they'll take in information, have a lot of self-talk, and then make decisions, right? But so I'm highly visual. If I go on stage and I only use visual words like imagine, envision, can you see what I'm saying, right? If you only speak with those words, everyone else feels like they're left out. But if you can use that resonates with me, that sounds good. How does that sound to you? Then you take in the auditory digital. I think that this is going to happen. I know that when I really analyze it inside, right? Like you can use all of these things, then it becomes a room of immersion, right? Because everyone feels like you're speaking to them. That's what I loved about NLP. Now, I do see people, I'll never forget, big name, was on stage and he had put something on all of our seats. And so I'm looking at it. He says, okay, now there was something on the front of it. So he's like, everyone stand up and we're going to read this sentence. And we're all committing to it. And it was like, I am a community leader. Let's see, with healthy boundaries and habits. And I express myself well. Well, he had us all commit to it, something like that, right? Then you open up first page, join the community. Second page was his healthy program, right? Then the third one was his speaking program. I was like, he just indoctrinated us. We committed to it. So now it's like we can't say no to his programs because it's what we said we wanted and what we are. And so we had to step in and I was like, oh my gosh. And I didn't even know NLP back then. I was like, I saw it and it was like, I didn't realize that this, because a lot of times when we go to events, we're just kind of like mindlessly listening and taking notes and just not really like taking apart what they're doing on the stage. Right. And that's when I was like, okay, there's some magic here. And I was like, I want to learn more because I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want to be manipulated. Right. So now I can see it coming. But the other thing was, it's like, yeah, you don't have to do that part. There's so many other things to it. So I do know that there are speakers that are heavy NLP, right? And they're like making it cold in the room. They're keeping you up for 12 hours. They're not feeding you very much. Like all those things have some passion behind it that they're trying to get you to be like, oh, I just want it to stop. Let me buy already. And it's sad. But now I see it and I kind of giggle through it now, but I now like to watch and go, oh yeah, I see it now. Right. Just now it's kind of fun for me to watch.
Right. Well, it was interesting. I remember talking to someone because I feel like that element can keep some people away from speaker training when they think like, oh, that's what I would be learning, but I find it distasteful. Right.
Yeah.
But I heard somebody say, you know what? That's what people do when they are selling to an unsophisticated crowd. And I thought, isn't that interesting?
Beautiful.
I mean, it's so unfortunate that that's what people feel like they have to do. Right. And I agree with you. Like the more that we learn about how people relate to information, because really the goal for any of us is to what?
Well, I want to transform lives. Yeah.
Change lives. Right? That's right.
Yeah.
Like reach people and change lives. And to do that, you got to get people to make choices sometimes that are outside their comfort zone, right? That get them out of the normal way of doing things. And so I do think, because I know, like of Jane Powers' work, and I've mentioned her several times. She had a system.
She and I actually partnered for like a year.
Totally. Doing like speaker boot camps and stuff. Yes. And she had a system, I think it was called like Code to Close, where it was about understanding people's like primary patterns in their personalities, right? So she'd labeled people like catalysts, relators, optimizers, and then experts. And even that simple system really helped me better understand even just how to speak to people that were on the other side of a Zoom call, right? Yeah. And it's all, I think so much we can utilize these tools, but in line with our own intentions, right? We don't have to necessarily like follow systems, follow patterns, do things that we don't like, even as speakers that want to influence people. But I think so much is about our intention, how we map it for ourselves in a way that's authentic and that we feel like really works.
Well, and I think that's when you really do, you come to that servant's heart. Like, so I do things before I even get into a room. So I just got back from Atlanta. I was speaking for my friend Danella. And before the room even opened, because I flew and I did a red eye. So I got there at 6 a.m. setting up the
That's
room.
brutal. I'm just
Oh
gonna
yeah.
say I did a red eye one time to a Dan Kennedy event, and I was like, never again.
Yep, that's exactly, because I had like 2 hours and I ended up in the middle seat because I gave it up to a family, which I was nice, but I was like, that was dumb. Because then I was like, all right, I got to go get a couple hours in before I got to go take stage. But I walk into the room and I literally put my hands on every single chair and I just kind of say, universe, may allow the person that sits in this chair to get exactly what they're looking for whatever I say, whatever anyone else says here, that this is the chair of transformation. And I literally put my energy into all the chairs. My hope is they walk in and that intention is set for them. So no matter what, and I don't care if it's me or anyone else, it does not matter to me, but it's that they get the highest and best that they need, right?
Yes.
And so when I told that on stage in Atlanta, they were, when we after my talk, we had a little panel and they were asking like some of these things. And I was like, well, let me just tell you what I do. Because I said, I'm speaking to the souls in seats, not the butts in the seats. I'm speaking to their souls, their higher selves that want them to better themselves, to get to where their their full potential. And so I don't speak to the little skin suits in the seats. I speak to the souls. And they were like, whoa, and the intentionality. And I don't care what you believe, religion, meditation, whatever, all those things. It doesn't matter. That intention setting, the whole room was like, whoa, I never knew somebody did that. Right. But that's when you care about them.
Yeah. Well, and I think it really changes the way that you show up to a room. Right? Think of that energy. I'm thinking of that guy I don't care for too much. the, the energy, it's a lot of charisma, but it almost has this like falseness about it once you've seen his presentation more than once.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, oh, my skin is creepy crawling a little bit. Very, very different energy than I'm here to serve. I want people to get whatever they need out of this. The right people will show up, and it's less of a push and more of a true invitation.
Right. And that's what it should feel like, right? Like we said, a conversation, even though you're the only one speaking. But I think those other people are like, I got the ShamWow. Look at here, look, buy now. And if you buy today, you get 2 for free. It's like, no, please don't.
Yes.
And then that it's about them. This is the thing that I think people, when they think about speaking, they get afraid because they're like, oh, everyone's looking at me. It's all about me. And it's actually not. It's about them. And like I said, setting that intention for everyone and making it all about them. Then my presentation doesn't matter because it's about what they need, how they need to be served. Right. And I went in that room earlier that day before I had to do my talk, and I shifted it because I saw when somebody asked a question about, I don't even remember what it was. I just shifted because I was going to do a talk just on how to land a TED Talk. Right. My book just came out. So I was teaching on that and sharing that. And then when I saw that a lot of people were in the speaking contest and they didn't know how to use the stage, didn't know how to use their voice, didn't know how to, do a lot of the things, I was like, I got to shift this. I will talk about TEDx, but I'm going to shift it into what's going to actually help these people, because it was a whole competition over 3 days and we just kept narrowing it down. And I was one of the speaking judges as well. So everything I did was about for them. Right. It wasn't, I could be up there like, here's my book, like, here's me, like, buy my book. No, it wasn't. It was about how to serve them the best. And that's when they were like, wow, she really even cared enough to shift, from like talking about what she came here to talk about, but to really serve us. Right. And I think that's the difference.
Oh, it's huge. Well, and you've mentioned a couple things. You've mentioned, first of all, your intentionality, right? And the way that you even approach a room before the event starts. You've mentioned, having to help so many people shift from like, oh, the message is all about me, to no, the message is all about who's in the room, right? Your audience. What other, I'd be curious what other like ahas or surprises people find when working with you and going through the process of like really truly learning how to speak. What do you see?
Yeah. So what I've broken down is called the 4 parts of compelling communication. So 50% of what the audience is taking in is your body language, nonverbal communication. And we don't realize, like you were saying, when you get sweaty or you start to shake or any of these things before you get on stage, what happens is because we're having those neurochemicals going through our body, we start to try to self-soothe. So we might pin our elbows to our sides. I would call this danger, Will Robbins, danger, right? Pin your elbows to the sides. You might, some people like do weird things like slapping their hip, or I'm like, why are you beating yourself up? They stay too far back on the stage. Like all of this stuff, they lack confidence. Like, here's this amazing, like, here's my video. Oh, welcome to the stage, Erin, Loman, Jeck. And then it's like, and they do all these weird things, right? So that is a huge component, and people don't realize that that has to be there, and you're in congruency with what you're saying. If I'm telling you the story of my dad's funeral, my very first speaking engagement, and I'm smiling, or I'm, having body language that doesn't line up with what I'm supposed to be, the feelings that people are portraying and wanting them to feel, it doesn't land, and the people go, "What is going on here? I'm confused." And a confused mind says no. They're like, right? Then when we take it to the next level and we go, the second part is the vocal tonality. It's your pitch, pace, tone, volume. And if you use them interchangeably, when I learned this from Roger Love about your vocals, because I was not a singer, I did not know anything. But when I learned about vocals was when you do that, you create a melody, you actually unlock the episodic part of someone's memory. Because he was just like, it's, if you create a melody with your voice, people remember you. And I was like, yes, but this is the reason, because we might not remember what we ate for breakfast, but if we turn on the radio and I hear a song from like 20 years ago and we know every single lyric, it's because it's stored in a different part of our memory. So if you really want to be memorable, you have to learn to master your voice. So that one's 30%, right? So we have 50, 30. Then we go into storytelling, which is 13. And that was kind of what we talked about before. Not me, right? It's tell your story so that everyone's in it. If I'm talking about my daddy's funeral, I'm like, I'm 10 years old. Actually, what I say is, I said, it was a standing room only. And I said, I was shaking. I didn't think I could get through it. I had the lump in my throat and the tears rolling down my face because, this is my daddy's funeral. And everyone goes, oh, right. And here's the thing I just did. Secretly, I just got you to think about a time where you had to speak, where maybe you shook. Maybe you know what it feels like to have the lump in your throat, tears rolling down your face. That's the human connection. It's not about me telling my story for my own benefit. It's me telling the story and wrapping everybody into it so that they go, oh, I've been there, done that. They might not have spoke at their dad's funeral, but they had one of those things happening for them. And so if you can really do well at storytelling, then you're going to get the whole room wanting to go to the back of the room, right? Because they feel acknowledged, seen, heard, validated, and you have no idea because you don't know them. You might not know them at all, but when you tell your story that way, they all come in. And then the last thing is 5% is the words, right? So 5%, I do say you should use NLP, powerful words. Now I don't get up there and be like, so I sort of kind of have this offer that I'm going to kind of sort of introduce you to. And it's like, oh, stop having wishy-washy language, right? But the other thing is that we talked about before, using those, the learning styles in order to get everybody enrolled. So that's really the secret sauce of what I do, and helping you master all of that, whether you're talking to your children, whether you're talking to your spouse, or you're talking to 10,000 people on a stage. It doesn't matter, or even on Zoom. It all relates.
Well, it's so fascinating. You go through the components and the percentages, and what do people focus on the most?
Writing the stuff.
The words, the 5%, right? Like that's what stands out about that is people like stress out and freak out about, and even when you relate this, like think about somebody's marketing. I remember somebody being like, doesn't matter what words you use if the message is wrong. Right. And people are focusing on the words. Yep. And yet I just love how you outlined all this other stuff that is, also part of the picture and a really, really significant part.
Yeah. And that's the thing that people need to master. I didn't wake up and just be this amazing, awesome speaker. And I always do this in my events. I show like a video of me being interviewed. It was actually one of those like who's who of Seattle or whatever. I'm being interviewed on the red carpet. And I was smiling so much that my gums were sticking to my lip was sticking to my teeth. And licking them on camera, right? Literally. And then I'm like fidgeting with my shirt. And then I said awesome about 10 times. Yes, that was awesome. I was like, what am I doing? Right. So I show them because I want people to see that it didn't start out that way. Like you might think that I'm this way because it's natural. No, no, no. Do you see this? I worked at it. It's a mastery. And I just attended an event with a top speaking coach. And I just sat through a 3-day online event to see if there was something I didn't know. Right.
Mm.
But it also always reminds me like how good I am at what I do, which is kind of nice. It's a good validation. But I want to see if there's anything I don't know. There's something else I can grab that I can then help teach my audience as well. I'm down for it. So it's being committed to mastering it so that you do it effectively. And it feels so natural for people to go, I want to take you home with me. How do I do that?
Right. So such a great end result. How do you, because I think one of the things that we all face, whether it's speaking, I mean, even like watching ourselves on camera, listening to our voice through a podcast, right? It was really hard when I went to launch this podcast because I edited my first like numbers of episodes. I learned Hindenburg, I did the full thing. And actually, I'm really grateful for that experience because you learn so much having to hear yourself back. You're like, oh man.
I always have an inhale breath right before I talk. So I'd have to edit that, but I could see it on
Oh,
the
totally.
screen, right?
Visually.
So I just cut it.
Oh, it's hilarious. And I also like what I'm curious about is how do you help people be more gentle with themselves in that learning process, right? Because we're already, most of us, so hard on ourselves. It's like the thought of having to like go through the training of like watching ourselves back or really face all the little fidgets and weird things that we do,
Yep.
like how do you help people soften up a little bit and relax into
Yeah.
that process where they're not so self-critical?
I think the biggest thing is you just find one thing you can do better next time because we will annihilate ourselves. We'll sit there and we're like, oh, look at me. I just itched my arm. Oh my God, people are going to see that. Like we do this stupid stuff where it's like we're over analyzing any of it instead of just going, no, this is just two girls having a conversation. I itched my shoulder, whatever. Right. But that's what we tend to do. We pick up on these stupid things that really aren't that impactful. Most people hate the sound of their own voice. Roger Love taught me that even Christina Aguilera cannot stand the sound of her own voice. Right?
What?
Some of the
Right.
biggest names in the world can't stand the sound of their own voice. Major actors never go see themselves on screen because of this, right?
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can just pick one thing. And what I like to do is to help you kind of look at the nonverbal since it's so impactful, watch yourself back with them on a mute. Watch it back muted. What am I portraying? What do I look confident? What kind of message is she delivering if I don't know what she's saying? What's coming off of me? What are the things people can pick up about me, right? So look at that first and just pick one thing that you might, maybe it's those stupid fidget things, right? Or holding onto the microphone with dear life or, things like that, right? But find just one and just do that better next time. And then that can be the way that you start to master it. It doesn't all have to come at once, right? But vocal tonality, I write people's speeches in the tonality so that they practice it because where else are you going to practice that? Or I had an executive once, I said, and he was Indian and he's like, he had the same monotone and he barely opened his mouth. And so we worked really much on his jaw and opening it up. And so you can have more sound come out. But also I was like, go home and read to your kid. Go home and read like you're the character and change the characters. Like this one could be a little higher. And then the daddy bear is a little lower, right? Like you do this because that you want the kids engaged. So why wouldn't we do that on stage? So practice those things so that you really do get good at knowing when to go up in your tone. When it's something positive, go up in your tone. When you want something to be more morose and negative, you want to go down. So if you're talking about your clients' issues and pain points, but then when you talk about your solutions, you want to go up. So even if that's the only thing people do, that's something that can help right then and there. And so every time I write, I color code people's speeches so that they practice it just like we would muscle memory as a sport, right? It becomes muscle memory. And then you realize when to do this in every conversation.
Oh, that's so good. I love the idea of you're overlaying the tonality, like as you write the speech. I mean, even talking about what you learned from Roger Love around like a musical cadence, because it takes me back to my music days where every portion of every song, like literally every measure, my piano professor used to be like, what is the point of this measure? Is it leading to something, right? Is it closing something? Is it, and you're talking about tonality, you're talking about how loud or how soft, you're talking about, is it speeding up? Is it slowing down? Right? But it's
Yep.
all like musical language. And
It is.
so I think that it's really, first of all, it makes it more fun to think about a presentation or a speech in this way, right? Because so often we're just dissecting words. It
Right.
really changes the way that you even like visualize that. So that was super fun. I love you sharing that.
Yeah.
So I know I could keep asking you so many questions. For folks that are listening that are like, I think I need to hop over and see what Erin is up to and check her out online if they haven't already.
Yeah.
Where do you like for people to, first of all, do you like for people to connect with you, and where do you show up online?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be able to give, because you have such an amazing audience. I wanted to be able to give something that's really impactful. We're talking about speaking being the fastest path to cash, right? So I want to teach you all how to make 10K anytime you take a stage. So I'm giving away, the URL is 10K, the number 10K, 10K from anystage.com. You'll get a blueprint of how I do it, even if you can't pitch, even if you can't sell
Mm.
from stage, how I still am able to close 10,000 and above, right? Every single time. So then you know that when you get out there, maybe if you have to travel, you have to do these things, you know you're going to make the money back, right? And more, right? So I wanted you all to have that. You can always go to my website, which is erinlomanjeck.com. And it has a lot of free resources there. And then the last thing is I just put a lot of this stage, vocal tonality, all this stuff into a book that I just put on Amazon. It's called Your TEDx Bible. So you can go look that up. But it really breaks down a lot more of these things that I'm talking about. So you really know how to put that into a talk. So even though it's about a TEDx and how to land your TED Talk and all the way from idea to standing ovation and beyond, it really has some of these key components that I'm talking about that could really help them.
Oh, I love that so much. And I know like TEDx, we could probably do a whole separate conversation, right, on just that topic. So
Yeah.
I apologize, we didn't get there. And I'm so glad you mentioned your book, because that does seem like any presentation, even mini ones, could be like a mini kind of microcosm of everything that you teach in that TEDx book,
Right.
right? And the way that you prep your TEDx speakers. So I love that you mentioned that. We're definitely sharing your main website. We'll share your resource you just mentioned, which, folks, if you're listening, hop over, get her mini training and the blueprint on how to make 10K anytime you go speak. I'm going to go get it. And then also we will share the link to your book. Congratulations, by the way. That's so awesome. Folks, you can find that at the show notes page, which is legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. Find Erin's episode. Erin, I'm so glad we finally got to
I
connect on
know.
here. I love what you do. I know the importance of what you do. And so I'm so excited that some new folks get to hear from you and go check out your resources. What final either action step, takeaway, piece of advice do you want to leave our listeners with today?
Yeah, I think now more than ever, the world's crying out for leaders. I mean, we can look at political stuff, we can look at everything that's been going on in the last 3 years. Everyone's calling for leadership, and you have the solution to someone's problem. If you don't get out there and share it, you're doing the world a disservice, because it's not about you. It's about serving those people. And so show up, do the work, get out there, speak on stages and transform lives, because the world needs it now more than ever.
I love that so much. Goosebumps. You heard it here, guys. Go follow Erin. Erin, I so appreciate you. I'm so happy that we get to share you today and your resources. Thank you so much for being here.
And thank you, love. It's my pleasure.